Hi there berries, welcome to my Occultist Enchanter Diablo 4 beta guide. We are going to be covering pretty much everything to do with legendary extraction, converting rares into legendary, how to min-max your legendaries, especially when you get into late game. That will all apply from what I'm talking about when you're going to be doing in the full game. Also, we're going to be talking about some extra things in the full game that we don't have access yet to the beta, such as nightmare dungeons. So the first thing that you want to do is, if you are wanting to convert a rare to a legendary or changing a legendary power, is coming to this Occultist, which in the main city is to the northwest, or west should I say, identified by these little 3 circles here. Now this process can be kind of confusing, which is why I'm making a guide on it so that you don't make any mistakes, because if you make a mistake it can potentially cost you a lot of money and give you a massive headache, because you will potentially have to sacrifice legendaries in order for this to work. So for example, I have this rare item here and I want to make it so that it has a legendary power. So if you don't know, legendaries have these extra little orange stars next to them which can augment your builds. Some are general survivability things, some are completely build changing. For example, my staff augments my frozen orb and makes frozen orb go from okay to really good. So it's a way to making sure that you can keep some of these build changing powers as you replace gear, because eventually, for example, this staff will fall off in terms of damage per second and I'll get a better staff that with better affixes, but I might not get that power, so I can keep that power by extracting it and putting it into a different legendary. For example, in the rare example, if you wanted to convert a rare to a legendary, so this random dagger here that I've got here, there are 2 ways in order to add a legendary power onto this item and then convert it into a legendary. Do note, when you are converting rares to legendary, the rares have 3 affixes. So as you can see here, it's got core skill damage, damage to slow enemies, and lucky hit. When you are converting this to a legendary, those 3 affixes will still be the same, and then it will have the bonus legendary power on top. Legendaries, when they drop, will always have 4 affixes. So legendaries, when they are dropping, have the potential to be much better. But say if you find a rare with 3 affixes that you really need with your build, say if you've got like a crit build and it's got crit chance and crit damage and then some other type of power, so those affixes that you really need, and you can then just whack a power on top, and then can potentially be stronger than a legendary drop that way, just because depending on how strong those 3 affixes are. So it makes it an easier way to get to a good point with your build, but it will never be the maximum potential of min-maxing. So min-maxing, you're always going to want to have legendary good affixes drop for you. So there are 2 ways to convert this yellow into a legendary or give it a legendary power. The easiest way is via the Codex of Power. Now the Codex of Power will get stronger and adds more powers to it as you complete dungeons. So these are the dungeon symbols here, and then the little chest next to it means you haven't completed that dungeon yet. So for example, from this dungeon, the first time we complete it, we're going to get a necromancy only power. So if that power is something that I particularly need for my build to work quite well, I would need to complete that dungeon. I would then come back to the Occultist, go to the Codex of Power, and then find that power that I wanted. So let's just use a random example here. And then it will then convert into that legendary, but note again that it keeps the same 3 affixes but applies that legendary power. Another thing to note is that the legendary powers from the Codex of Power will never be as strong as ones that drop from the open world as well. So these are kind of like baseline, maybe even minimum kind of power, so it gives you what you need for your build, but because of how easy it is to obtain, it is a weaker variant of that legendary power. So for example, it could have more piercing or dealing a higher percentage amount of damage or anything like that. So that's the easiest way to do it, and it costs veiled crystals, which you can get from salvaging gear, and you have a gold cost there too, which is a decent chunk of gold. Alternatively, you can extract legendaries to take their power and then allow you then to put it into a different item. So if we go into extract aspect, and here I have an amulet. So this amulet is when you're not healthy, a magical bubble is summoned around you for 4.5 seconds. While standing in the bubble, players are immune, can only occur once every 90 seconds. So it's a 4.5 second bubble. If we put that to be destroyed, in this case, I will get the legendary aspect from that, so that I will then be able to use that in any other rare or legendary item that I wish. But as you can note that in some cases, the power does actually go down. So in this case, we've gone from a 4.5 second duration to a 3-second bubble. So once again, power extraction can make the thing weaker. In some cases, that's not the case. Like for example, my helmet here, if I put my helmet in this, I've got 3.7 life per second each close enemy nearby. The extract is actually the same. And my staff, for example, this build changing frozen orb, 60% does go down to 30%. So that is a dramatic fall off. So do be careful and do check how much power you are potentially losing when doing that extract. So in this case here, we're going to extract this bubble from this amulet, which will then give us a 3-second bubble, which we're allowed to put into any helmet, chest, pants, amulet, or shield slot. It costs gold to extract, so we're going to extract this. Are you sure you want to? This will destroy the legendary, by the way. So we'll accept that.
Done.
And then we'll have a separate aspects tab in our inventory. So if we click that, that has now entered my inventory. I did extract another amulet that had the exact same power, but because it had a higher base value, even though it's a lower item power, so you can see on this power it's 192 item power, it has a 5-second bubble duration. Whereas even though this one was from a higher item level, because the base number was actually higher, on the other amulet, this one's only got 3 seconds. So it doesn't matter necessarily, at least at the moment, that item level matters. The only thing that really matters is how much core value is on the item in terms of the property anyway, for some of these degradation kind of powers. So now we have that aspect, and we have a helmet here that we can apply that to. So once again, you could use the Codex of Power to convert this item into a legendary, as shown before. We can use an aspect that we've extracted from one of the other amulets that I had, and then we can make that so same affix properties, pretty much the same helmet, apart from now it has that legendary power, which can be build changing. Costs another veiled crystal and a tiny bit of gold to then convert that into a legendary. Now, say for example, in this other example where we want to change the power of a legendary. So say for example, this helmet, I'm not happy with the healing that it gives. I think the power is rubbish, but I really like the defensive stats that this helmet's giving me. So I really like the affixes, but the legendary power just doesn't quite hit the mark. You can then use the aspect that you've got from when you've salvaged a different piece of gear, and now suddenly you have a power that you actually want, and you've got some really nice affixes. This isn't a perfectly maxed item, but it's got a lot of the things that you want, and you know, min-maxing, you can obviously, you know, try and find another item that drops it with the exact stats that you need, but this is a good way to get that step closer in order to squeezing every potential power out of your build. Once again, if you don't have the power extracted, you can just go use the Codex of Power, find something from there that you can use and change that. So you're totally able to do that and take powers and swap them between legendaries. Just do bear in mind, when you are extracting powers from a legendary item, you are completely destroying the item. Another thing as well with the Codex of Power, yes, it will give you baseline things. you know, the added benefit is that you don't have to destroy a legendary, you just have to complete a dungeon once in order to access these powers. But I will say I have noticed that the Codex of Power does not have every single legendary power in the game. For example, the Frozen Orb Staying in Place power can only be found on legendary items and will not be found in the Codex of Power. So there are some things that you are going to have to specifically seek out and extract and destroy in order to have access of that one use aspect conversion over. Because when you do use the aspect, so in this case we're going to do it, we're going to convert this rare into a legendary. If I use this, I have now lost that aspect forever. So that is a one-time use only. So make sure that you are putting that power, particularly if it's a really rare power, on an item that you definitely want to keep for a decent chunk of time, because you don't want to be wasting these powers, particularly in the late game, especially if it's something rare and build defining for you. So that is the whole kind of mechanic of extracting and enchanting gear, or imprinting and extracting. Crafting sigils is something that's going to be bringing into full release, and we don't have access to that. This is definitely entering into end game territory, but there are things in the game that we can talk about and what you can expect what the kind of end game loop potentially is. So we have these different sigils going from sacred to ancestral. As you can see, they go from tier 1 all the way to tier 100. They require more sigil power in order to get those, and you can see when you mouse over them, the tier 91 to 100 has 5 afflictions, tier 1 has 3. So these are going to be probably affixes that the dungeon's going to have to make it harder. So starting from 3, going all the way up to 5. And these dungeons are assuming going to be harder as we go up the tier. Now, in order to craft one of these, in order to get the sigil power, I'll explain how to get that in a second, but these sigils are basically used to convert a dungeon into a nightmare dungeon, which is going to make it super difficult. You also need to be in a higher world tier for this to work. So in this case, for sacred, you need to be in tier world 3, and then the ancestral ones, you need to be in world tier 4, which means the monsters are going to be harder, but you're going to have chances of getting those unique drops that we don't have access to right now in the beta. So to get these, also you can salvage the sigils. So if there's sigils that you don't want, then you know you can kind of get rid of them. But there is another piece of information here that we can use in order to figure out what's happening in late game. So we have actual enchanting, so we can replace an affix on an item. So if I put my legendary chest piece in here, we will be able to choose one of these stats to then replace. So say for example, I don't want the damage reduction, and I know on chest piece, for example, we can get percentage damage, and I really need more damage in my build. Let's just, you know, re-roll that affix, but you need materials to do so. You need veil crystals, again, like with the previous applying and salvaging the aspects off. But also you need a Fiend Rose. Now this is something found through Hell Tides. And now Hell Tides, from the information that I have gathered, that is in the game at the moment, Hell Tides spawn in Torment 3 or 4. And they are kind of like world events. From the information I'm gathering is that an area of a map will be corrupted, and then you'll be able to do activities there, whether it's events or just killing mobs in general, to then get presumably slightly boosted drops and have the chance of getting those much needed Fiend Roses. So that's how you acquire those, and it is nice that we are going to be able to at least re-roll one of the affixes. We don't know for sure, but I'm assuming once you choose an affix, that one will be permanently locked. So if you choose damage reduction and you replace that affix, you're only going to be able to roll that one affix over and over again. The 10 intelligence and the 5 damage reduction from close enemies will be permanently there. And that we'll only be able to swap out this 1.9% damage reduction, and it will keep re-rolling into other things in the affix pool. One thing which would be quite nice, which I hopefully Blizzard will add, is showing us what the potential possibilities are from those. I don't know if they're going to add that or if that will be in the game, but that would be really handy to see kind of what other affixed potentials we can get on that role, without having to use like third-party websites and things, because otherwise that can get messy quite quickly. But hopefully that gives you a in-depth guide on how to use the Occultist. Hopefully that cleared up any potential confusion, because when I first came across this, I was a little bit confused, especially with the Codex of Power stuff and unlocking them from dungeons. I wasn't really too sure how or if I should use them. So definitely use them if you really need to add it to your build. If you're the kind of person that checks every single yellow for kind of perfect stats for yourself, you will be rewarded with this system, because you will be able to have those 3 stats that you really want, and then add a power to it. Whereas a lot of players like myself just salvage everything and then just move on and only look at the legendary drops. So if you like looking at the yellows as well, this can be beneficial for you. And then also, you know, keeping an eye on what legendaries you get for extraction, and then you know, making a really good affixed item with a bad legendary power, swapping that power out, making it super good into your actual build, is going to be a crucial way of playing late game. But as I said, I hope you guys enjoyed the guide. I've done other Sorceress guides on the channel. I'll put them down underneath the video if you are interested in looking at, particularly at the moment, my favorite build on Sorceress is a Frozen Orb build, which I highly recommend. Hence why I'm using this staff with 60%. The double explosion thing on Frozen Orb, it's really good. And I do intend on making more guides for Diablo 4 and playing more once it launches and helping out people with the game. So do subscribe, and I hope you found this video helpful. All the best, take care, and see you for another video.